Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Diaspora History Podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past, what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you. Welcome to Diaspora History Podcast, where we explore the histories, journeys, and connections that shape who we are across the Caribbean and the wider African diaspora. Today's episode invites us to think deeply about return. Not just travel, but as reconnection, remembrance, and transformation. I'm honored to be joined by Chedwick Crieghtney, founder of the Gold Pill Group, an initiative dedicated to guiding what he calls conscious return tours to Africa. Through his work, he creates powerful experiences that reconnect members of the diaspora with the African continent, not just geographically, but spiritually, culturally, and historically. At a time when many are seeking deeper meaning in their identity and ancestry, Chedwick's work challenges us to consider, what does it truly mean to return? And what does it look like to reconnect with a homeland shaped by history, displacement, and resilience? In this conversation, we'll explore the vision behind the Gold Pill Group, the transformative power of these journeys, and how reconnecting with Africa can reshape how we understand ourselves in the present. Because for many in the Caribbean and across the diaspora, the journey isn't about where we're going. It's about remembering where we came from. So let's have a listen. Thank you so much, Chedwick Crieghtney, for coming on to the podcast to speak about your company, the Gold Pill Group, reconnecting the diaspora to the continent. So before we start, can I just have you just do a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. My name is Chedwick Crieghtney. I am the CEO of the Gold Pill Group. We are a company, as you clearly stated. My mission is to reconnect the diaspora to the continent. And by doing so, we orchestrate and curate trips or destination travel to various countries in West Africa and East Africa.
Oh, lovely. And so, to start, would you be able to share about your own journey, like how you came to be involved in diaspora engagement and what reconnecting to the continent means to you personally?
Okay, it's something that's absolutely powerful and means so much. It's funny, you go through your entire life. I was born in Jamaica, grew up in Canada for many years, and then I was hired as a consultant. I'm a consultant by nature, and I was hired as a consultant to go and do some work in Ghana specifically. It was it's a major company here looking to do. They were looking to get a ground swell or some underground connection on the continent. And so they approached me to kind of represent the company and kind of vet and do some recognizance on ground. And while doing so, once I landed in Ghana, it was just, it was just like something awoke in me. It's funny, I'd been searching before. You have your questions, where are we from? And, being Jamaican and being from the Caribbean, everything appears to be a secret because the elders, they don't really speak much of, where they're from. They don't speak much of what's going on. There's an air of secrecy. And when you're a child, you're taught to, be seen and not heard.
Yes.
But as you mature, we start to look for, hey, what makes me me? And where did I learn some of these from? And when am I happy? When am I not happy? What do I know about myself? But I find, unfortunately, in the Caribbean, we just don't have enough people that's searching and finding to about the core essence of who we are. So as a result, it causes a division by islands, right? So you have this one island, and Trinis speak against Jamaicans, Jamaicans speak against Trinis and Bajans, and wherever you're from, there's not that strength in connection. I mean, we joke about it and we laugh about it. The only thing that brings us together is a fit or death, right? And there's not enough digging for the ancestral belonging. And even so much as religion is not enough of that to figure out where do we sit in this and what's our true belief. So that's what drove me, that once I got there and I saw there was so much, it was like something exploded in me and I felt so grounded. Initially, I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks.
Mm.
And I said, look, I'm not leaving. And I stayed 6 months.
Wow. Oh my
Six
God.
months. I lived there. I traveled. I met with elders. I spoke to people on the ground, and just to get a feel of who they are and what why do I feel so connected, right? All the billboards look like us, and everything just felt comfortable. So then I called my wife and I said, you got to come down. You got to feel this because there's no explaining it. So I sent her a ticket and she came there and she stayed for a couple of weeks, and then she came back and I finished my time there because I had to. It helped me find me,
Mhm.
right? And even as something as simple as an encounter with the police or someone in a authoritative position, it was just a different feeling because they were talking to you man to man.
Yes.
And I often say this to people is that the biggest thing, the most impactful thing for me was that I felt just like a man. Not, I wasn't identified by the color first, which is here. We're always seeing a big, a 6'2" black guy walked in the door instead of a man walking in the door. And that was the most impactful thing for me.
Oh, that's amazing as to what you described, because I mean, it just makes you that you were acknowledged, and then of
Right.
course something is well awakened in you.
Yes, it was so much so.
Mhm. And so, for listeners who may be just hearing about the Gold Pill Group for the first time, can you briefly describe what the organization is and the core mission driving the work?
Right. So it's funny how the name came about. I start as a consultant.
Mm.
One of the things that, and I consider myself more of a free thinker, right? And it's a reference to the movie The Matrix, in which you're taking the red pill or the blue pill. Red pill, you kind of break from the matrix and in this surrounding, and the blue pill, you just kind of stay ignorant. Where I found there's a third choice, and for me, in our society today, we're given one or two. It's not, that's not choice, right? I think one or two is not choice. Choice is where you get to choose from a conglomerate of different options, right? For example, politically, we have the here in Canada, we have I keep wanting to say Democrats, but of course, we have
Liberals
the
and the
conservatives and the
conservatives is what
liberal,
we have
yeah,
here.
liberals and the conservatives, right? And in the US, we have the Republicans and Democrats. So those are not choices. Those just your opinions are given to you. You choose here or you choose there. Well, what about the other options? So for me, when I started getting more understanding of who I am and how I really think, I said, well, I want Africa to be the other choice. I want us to choose differently. So I came up with, my son came up with this concept, said, Dad, what about the gold pill? Instead of the, one or the other, you come from the place of gold. So choose the gold pill. And that's how the name originated.
Amazing, amazing, and a great analogy. So, when you talk about reconnecting the diaspora to the continent, what does the phrase really mean? Is it an emotional? Is it ancestral? Is it political? Is it economical? Or is it all of the above? And I think you touched
It's
upon it a little bit.
definitely all of the above. I think it starts with an emotional connection, right? And it's something that I can't tell people. You have to walk in you have to walk in the shoes. You have to go there, and feel it and see it, smell it, touch it. When I for one of my groups, and you'll see it in some of my testimonials, that's the first thing everyone says. It says, I thought I knew. Or this one lady in one of the testimony, I just asked her to speak freely. That's what I said. I said, look, you can say positive, negative, whatever you want to say about this journey that we went on. You tell me. And she said, I didn't think I needed healing until I took this trip. And it opens something up in you that it just makes you feel healed all of a sudden. It makes you feel, there's a term that, that's used, and I'm sure you've heard of it now, and it's actually been used for what used to be Dundas Square, Sankofa. And it's something that you talked about earlier, is when you return to your past to retrieve something that makes you whole in your present and your future. It's just taking what in order to strengthen yourself. And so that to me is where I all of a sudden, after 30 plus years of working in the corporate world and then working here as a consultant and doing my little thing, I just found something that was so profound that I said, I have to, this is what I was born to do. So my passion now is to take as many people that want to go and find out what it feels like to be on the continent, see the place of their ancestry, connect with the people that looks and feels and acts like them, regardless of the socioeconomic conditions. And yes, so that's from an emotional standpoint. From an ancestral standpoint, there's something that makes you question religion, right? And you question some of the things that we've been taught. We've been taught that, for example, a term that we use a lot, or it's, you hear about voodooism. And voodoo, it's something it was just another way of worship, but somehow they had this spin on it that makes it seem so devilish and so evil, where it's just a connection to your ancestry to help you understand who you are and what can help heal you and make you feel better. That in itself was something. Now, from an economic standpoint, Africa is rising. And I shouldn't even say it's rising. It's surpassing a lot of countries and a lot of nations right now. And opportunities are abound. And the funny thing is, if once you're on the continent, you see all the Europeans, all the Asians, you see everybody taking advantage of it. They're there. They understand what is happening economically. But here you come and tell our people, and they're worried about spending $4,000 to travel to the continent. They don't understand the only thing that's missing to make this whole thing great is the diaspora to go back, right? So from an economic standpoint, yes. It's also a refuge for those who are frustrated with what's here, right? There in the US, you see the frustration. You see what they call the Blaxit. A lot of people that looks like us, feel like us, they're getting out of it because there is something going on that just doesn't feel right in terms of the current party and what's happening there. And I'm not even going to go to all the history, but the one thing that we know is until we unite, things are going to continue to be difficult for us as a people. And so part of uniting is going and seeing where you're from. It doesn't matter, as someone once said, it doesn't matter where the ship let you off, it's where it picked you up.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And you referenced it, I guess, in a previous answer, but many in the diaspora carry the questions like, where am I really from? Do I
Mhm.
really belong? Like, how do you approach those conversations with individuals and families?
Well, what I do is I tell them, first of all, we understood the journey the transatlantic slave trade took, right? So we understand enough to know that, a lot of our people originated from certain parts, depending on what island, like I said, where you were let off. And genealogically, you can actually feel, you can go and take the test if you want and find out where some of your people from and then trace it that way. But I also encourage people to go ahead, go on over and see. You can go to Egypt, you can go to Ethiopia, Ghana, you can anywhere in West Africa, because that was a major hub in which a lot of the other West African countries, a lot of people, well, what if it's not Ghana? Well, the thing is, Ghana was recognized because it was a port of departure. Where a lot of the transatlantic slave trade ships departed from. So no matter where in West Africa you were from, that was the port of call. They would bring them down, and then they would enter the ship there, and then brought to what we consider now the West. So that's where, if people are curious, that's how I approach it. I don't get into a lot of hard discussions with people, because the truth is, similar to religion, some people are not ready for the conversation. It's somehow too deep for people. And most people nowadays, as you can see, they don't want to question. They just want to move along and get along. And the tough thing in our community is, it's almost like when you escape out a door, you're you're trapped in a room with a bunch of people, and the minute you escape, you forget about them and you assimilate to the people that are outside the door that were forcing you to stay in. And that's unfortunately how some of our people, we begin to just protect what we have and forget about the hand up, right? And unfortunately, that's our community, and that's a continued fight that we're going to have to change who we are.
It definitely is, and I would as well say that it comes with some sort of a pain or hurt that people don't want to face, don't want to look
Right.
at. So talking about reconnecting to the continent ends up being a painful something to look at, right? A mirror that they don't want to look into. So
Right.
how would you say, or how do you think important it is for ancestral records or DNA or oral history, and of course, cultural memory in reconnecting? Do all of these matter equally, or do you see certain elements as more powerful than others?
Oh, geez, that's a tough question. Personally, I think it's great to do the test, but as things have been proven over the last little while, there's some inconsistencies there from one to the next. So I'm not sure if I'd put too much weight on that. I think people can just go and find out for themselves. A little bit of research can show you directly where predominantly most of the people, your ancestors, came from. So if that's how once you connect and you feel, I was never a touchy-feely type of guy that says, okay, go by feelings. I was just strictly go by logic. But logically, if you eliminate certain things, you will find out that, yeah, I am definitely from certain parts. And I think it's important for people to actually go and figure this out on their own. But if not for you, for your future generation, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to kind of find out. And I was telling you earlier that I was having conversation with my mother and my uncle. The important thing is, because we lost who we are through naming, the important part of the naming, that's one of the reasons why I have everyone do the naming ceremony when we travel. Names mean so much. Actually, I didn't touch upon one of the reasons why I first started this. I have a friend that he's been a childhood friend, and he's a Scottish gentleman. And, me and him have been close for so many years, and he always talks about his ancestry, and he always talks about his grandfather, great grandfather, and all. And so he actually took a trip to Scotland, and he traveled along the path of his great grandfather, ended up in Ireland, and and England, somewhere his ancestry is from. And that made me kind of open up my eyes and said, well, how come we don't have that? How come I don't have that? So that's when I started on this journey to say, look, it was important. And I saw how proud he was of his name. And I don't know if I can be proud of my name. I just know that it was given to me. But what I found out in Africa beyond slavery is that we have such a great history beyond where it started, where what we think of slavery, where it started. And then the importance of name and how you're held up in a community by the name that's been given to you. And that is powerful. I don't know where the slave names that we have came from. There is no significance to it because it doesn't belong to us. I haven't officially changed my name because, as you can see, I named Chedwick Crieghtney. Where does that come from? But it really makes me feel something inside, and it's a powerful feeling when you go to anywhere in West Africa and you take that naming ceremony. There's a certain pride, and when you're wearing that traditional garment and you take the, and you feel kingship that rise up within you. That it's something, like I said, it's very difficult to explain, but you kind of feel how the community reacts to you as opposed to just here where you're just some guy.
Yeah, you're just one of many type
A
of thing.
number.
Yeah. But Chadwick, could I know that you shared your own personal stories, but would you be able to share a story from someone that you worked with that was, where the reconnection to the continent had a real emotional or a spiritual or just a practical impact on them?
Yeah. Well, there's a gentleman that actually one of my partners,
Mhm.
he, I told him about the trip, and I said, bro, you gotta go, and he says, okay, I'm gonna come on your next one. And a couple of years ago, he came back, and it's just amazing, as a grown man. And I'm gonna tell you about me, and I'll tell you about him. The first time that I experienced some of the things that you'll experience there, as a grown man, I stood and cried. I cried like a baby because it's such an emotional jar, and you do feel empowered after that. But initially, it kind of shocks you. So he went through a bit of that when he came, and his entire outlook on where he's going and what he wants to do is completely different, because his entire thought was on retirement and going back to the islands. Now, like me, the thought is, okay, maybe not just to the islands, maybe it's somewhere else. And so I'm looking to relocate there in the next year or two. And the funny thing is, that's where he's looking to relocate, because the grounding was so important to him as well. So now he's sharing stories with people about how you may think you're prepared, because no matter how much some people tell you about it, once you get there, you find that, okay, this is way different than just the conversation, So that's his story. And obviously he has a testimonial that he shares as well. And he talks a little bit about the changes that he's made in his life and how it's impacted him.
No, that's I can only imagine in terms of the, just the overwhelmness of just being there and
Yeah.
what that change, ignites into people for them to be able to make that change, as you said, to now they're going to go and retire there as
Mhm.
opposed to going to the Caribbean. And, how does, reconnecting to the continent not just help individuals, but entire communities, especially those, with this history of enslavement, displacement, and of course, migration?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part.
Oh, the migration part. So how does it, how would I guess, reconnecting to the
Yeah.
continent help, I guess, not just only the individuals, but entire communities?
Right. And that's a very important thought. What I say is, some people, of course, they pack up right away after visiting, and they shift. They moved without thought. Moving and relocating is one of the services that we provide, because there's going to be a cultural shift in your paradigm, right? So a lot of people they don't strategize, they don't plan before they jump. So they just say, okay, and I'm sure over the years you've heard of people who relocated to the continent, and all of a sudden a few years later they come back, and they feel, and then instead of saying, okay, I failed, they say, okay, they blame it on the continent. This was right, this was wrong. Of course, in what you consider the developing world, there's going to be difference. Now, I think the important thing is we have been indoctrinated into a Eurocentric behavior, and our expectations are a little different. Of course, when financially the I'm trying to be very non-political here.
Yes.
We know that a majority of the wealth was ripped from certain places in Africa and brought here. So we're in North America, the U.S., Canada, England, the Spaniards, Europe. They benefited from a lot of the financial gains in which that was raped from the continent. So as part of that, they're able to, over years, develop a democratic society in which they can shift money and, build infrastructure and all those things. Education's a little different.
Hmm.
That some of that is missing, right? Of course, in Africa. And so it takes time to develop it. And we, instead of bringing the best of what we have to and then understanding the culture of wherever we land, wherever in Africa we land, whether it's east, west, north, or south in Africa, if we there and we understand and be welcoming of the new culture and be willing to then incorporate some of what we have learned over the years into it, it'll make for a great community. But unfortunately, most people go there with certain expectations and they lead with just their expectations, right? It's not trying to learn and adapt and then incorporate slowly. They want everything shifted right away. And of course, Africans are a proud people, and they're going to be offended if you're going to come here and try to tell them how to run their lives, when, of course, their history and their culture has been slowly adapting and slowly changing to what they feel is great. So that's some of the challenges that we have. But by most part, when people go there with the understanding that they have to learn to kind of slowly incorporate some of what they're looking for, or maybe part of a diaspora community to help build whatever community they land in, I think it's the best way to go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, you did mention in terms of some of your work involving research, education, and outreach, and of course, community support. What other specific services or programs have you found to be the most impactful for the diaspora engagement?
Well, of course, most of what we've already spoke about
Yeah.
is important, but I think some of the simple things that we didn't know in terms of our education. It's funny, Europeans have courses on mining and gold, mining. They have those kind. In Africa, there's none. And that's where it all comes from. That was something that really surprised me, is that there were courses in Europe for mining, and all the miners were in Africa. So that surprised me. So I think with whatever skill sets that we have in technology, I think it's great to go there and build. I think they're a little bit more ahead of us in terms of technology. But any kind of services that you bring with an entrepreneurial flair to it, you will do great. And I think the continent will be appreciative of it, and the communities will grow as a result of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, in your view, why is this work so urgent and necessary right now, especially for the younger generations who may feel disconnected from ancestral roots?
Yeah, it is so important because, like I said, there's a shift going on in North America, and we have to be keenly aware of that. The growing economy It's Africa, right? You hear the stats just about every day now because people are now aware of it, and that by the year 2050, 40% of the world's population, youth population, is going, or the 40% of the population, it's going to be in Africa, right? That's employment. That's employment. So
Hmm.
what we have to do is we have to understand that's where the economy is going to be, and that's where wealth is going to be built. Here, in Canada specifically, the average young person right now can't afford a home because they're over $1 million. There, they can go and they can build a house, build a beautiful home, whether it's rural or somewhere close to the city in whichever one of the major countries that they've chosen, for less than $200,000, right? So I think I think the young generation have to, it's important for them to strive beyond their parents. It's, of course, we have generational. I say this to my son all the time. I fight against my own generational prejudice, right? Because we've been indoctrinated, like I said, into certain things, and because of those, our resistance to some things are difficult. As young people, we should welcome the idea that they want to be explorers. They want to look beyond just exactly where they are and stay another X amount of years and develop nothing. So, in order for a generation to move on, they have to look beyond the borders in which they've currently locked themselves into.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And of course, Chadwick, I know that your work, would definitely get challenging. And then what keeps you grounded and inspired and committed?
Well, like I said, until once I experience it myself, it's something that I'm so driven, and I consider myself a Pan-Africanist, right? So by nature, so I believe in the unification of Africa. I believe that I'm willing. It's something that I'm willing to die for. I believe so strongly in it that I think, and I am, one of the challenges I have is convincing our own people to look beyond chasing the carrots here, right? Is look at something different. But again, people get comfortable, and some of them are just afraid to take the chance because, oh, look at that flight is way over there. Well, I'm going to miss my family. But the truth is, most people here, they visit their family once a year for Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever it is, even if they're just 10 minutes down the road. By most part, they're connecting just like me and you're connecting over
Yes.
technology, right? So I said it's not going to be any different than if they just have, it's just mentally they think it's something that's it's so far away. But the truth is, it's the same difference with the technology, right? So once they kind of come to grips with the fact that I am still going to be in contact with them just as much as I would. You plan a trip once every 2 years or once every year to come and visit, or they come to visit, and you should be fine.
Yeah,
And people shouldn't be intimidated by the journey.
exactly. Exactly. And, I take it that you have different types of packages as well. Would you be able to at least discuss or talk about some of those packages that you
Sure.
have?
Sure. A lot of my initial trips, I always encourage people to travel to Ghana first, West Africa, because again, it's considered the gateway, and I'm
Hmm.
so comfortable there, so I take a lot of people there first. I have packages leaving. There's one in July, right? I think it's July 9th to the 19th, and that's more for educators. A lot of educators can't, that's the time frame in which that they're going to be free of school and all
Hmm.
their other responsibilities, so they can travel then, and that is, actually quickly filling up. I
Hmm.
have September. September is a combination of, there are two trips. One is Ghana and Egypt, and the other one is just Ghana, right? And I also have a Ghana trip in October, which is almost already full. There's a lot of people wanting to go on that one. I have about, I think, 25 people already. But I mean, I can go up to 50. It doesn't really matter. But because of the time, a lot of our people tend to wait till last minute and jump in. They can't really do so much because one of the biggest challenges that I have is are the flights, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's still very much a challenge getting proper flights to Africa. You know, when I'll provide a chart with you at some point
Yeah.
where you can see the amount of flights that all over the world, but they somehow make it more challenging to go to Africa, of course. And that's something for another show.
Yes.
Yeah, but there's that. I also have packages with that includes Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana, right? So you get a little bit of the east and west. There's still a lot of people that are still attracted by the by the safari,
Hmm.
and so we tend to include that so people can go to Tanzania or Kenya, and you get a variety of everything. From Tanzania you can go to Zanzibar, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world. You're looking on the Indian Ocean. You can also get the safari there, which is now the Tanzania safari is equal. I mean, they're border on Kenya, but
Yes.
the that safari I think now is more coveted than going to Kenya for their safari. But Kenya offers you so much more. It's so beautiful. You have what I call is the technological capital of Africa is Nairobi, and then you can go and you can see the mountains, you can go to the beach, you have everything there.
Hmm.
And that's what I'm saying. The continent is so beautiful. Everything that we covered in this side of the world is there. And you go to one country and you can get it all. But by most part, we prefer just to take a 3.5 hour flight to the Caribbean, and we never find enough about what's on the other side of the ocean.
Yeah, and I guess I know here in Toronto we just have that new direct flight from Toronto to Accra with Air Transat. Is that going to be introduced or part of your package moving forward?
100%. I think the
Yes.
only challenge with it, I'm hoping that they're going to expand that. Right
Okay.
now, it's only going to be for summer, so
Okay.
it's going from June to October. Um, on, so as far as our July group, yes,
Hmm.
they'll be taking that. The other thing is, I was partnered with a company. It's Air Peace. Air Peace is a
Mm.
Nigerian company that's now
Okay.
flying direct from the Caribbean, from Antigua to Nigeria, right?
Okay. Okay.
So they're actually taking people from Barbados
Hmm.
and Antigua. So if you're flying to Barbados or if you're, any of the islands really, they have a deal with Air Transat. With Liat, that you
Okay.
can do the jump to
Hmm.
Antigua and then fly from Antigua to they'll go to Nigeria first and then to Ghana.
Nice. Very
Yeah.
nice. And so for listeners who are curious about reconnecting but unsure where to start, what would be the first step you would suggest that they take?
They can reach out to me on either of my social media. I'm social media at
Mm.
thegoldpillgroup.com, or that's on our website, or
Yes.
the Gold Pill Group in Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a big. I'm a big promoter on LinkedIn, so any of those, you can contact, you can reach out, they can call or email me direct. I'll be happy to answer any of the questions that they may have. The beauty about this is I'm personally involved in just about any touch point for the diaspora at this stage. I believe it's important not only just to answer their questions, but to know that I'm going to go with you. I'm going to travel that journey with them,
Mhm.
to make sure that every step of the way that they're treated with the respect and and personal touch that I can.
Oh, great. That's great. That's great. And, as we close, Chedwick, what would finally say to the listeners to get involved or connect with the Gold Pill Group online?
Yes, I mean, I encourage as many people as possible, if not with me,
Yeah.
find some other way to reach out, to touch the continent, to see that I'm not sure how much or what's going to be that's happening in North America at this stage, but there's some eye-opening things that are happening. You know, we talk about the Epstein files and some of the things that's going on, and I don't think people have dug deep enough to see what really that's all about. But I think connecting culturally, the term I used before is Sankofa. When you look back a little bit and find out where you're from or where your ancestry is from, it empowers you to no end, and you can stand as a king or queen no matter where you are and not ever have to code switch because of how they indoctrinate here. I think that's the awakening that it gives you, and people should stop being afraid. I don't care if you're mixed race. Some people think they're mixed race, or even white folks. If you want to truly learn what we're about, the way you learn is by traveling those journeys. Some of our people say, no, that journey is not for them. But I think in order for us to be stronger, we have to let people see, know, and understand where we're from. And I think it's equally important for us to kind of spread the word, and we all we all should share in that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chedwick, for coming on to the podcast and discussing this. This has been quite enlightening and a really good resource for people to connect to their past. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I hope as many people reach out and not only to the group, but programs like yours is you're educating. I saw a few friends of mine that actually appeared on your show, and I'm really happy and proud of what you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay.
Hoped you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you.